me home. Don't need no nothing, all I need is time for the simple life. Go get your butt off of that lazy couch.
Welcome to The Simple Life, Stories for the Adventurous at Heart. I'm your host, Cynthia Fernandez, co-owner of Pilgrim's Way Community Bookstore and Secret Garden in downtown Carmel by the Sea. Today I'm getting a tutorial training from Hal Ginsberg, station owner, and I want to ask for your patience as I stumble forward into my learning the technical aspects of the show. Our guest last week, Pauline Allen, shared some of her personal experiences of growing up outside Perth, Australia, with Aborigines in her midst, and then in her young adult life, continuing to be in and around multicultural professional positions, like the assistant to the ambassador while living in New York. The theme of indigenous cultures and the differences between them and the modern cultures continues to feed our curious minds about possibilities and how structures relate to outcomes. So I was looking at a video that a friend of mine had loaned out last week, and it was a very different kind of school. This was a documentary, and at this school, the children designed, built, and decorated their own campus. They covered their entire high school curriculum in just 1 year. And, you know, in that time, they get official master's degrees by the time they're 17. They cook their meals. They do administrative work and write their own textbooks. They contemplate the meaning of the universe and swim in the mountain streams. They dance and draw, sing, and pick strawberries in the surrounding fields. They learn self-defense and master folk crafts, awakening their ancestral memories. They don't prepare for life. Instead, they live every moment they breathe. And you might be wondering, where is this school and what's going on there? Well, for decades now, this has been a Russian visionary who's been creating this model school for the future. And his name is Mikhail Petrovich Sketinin. Totally botched up his last name, but he's a very interesting man. During the documentary, most of the interviews were with the children, and the children were just bright-eyed and very clear, very coherent in their description of their life there. And I was very impressed with what's possible. And I know that those of us who live in and around the Central Coast, we have children either in our midst, in our family, or in our community, and it is a very important issue. I actually did a lookup, and according to Huffington Post, as of January 16th, just a couple days ago, they listed California as ranking 34 out of 50, meaning nearer the bottom than the top of performance in school. And, you know, the topic of education is close to home for all of us, really. So my question is, what is the heart of education? Is it learning? Is it jobs? Or maybe something beyond that, like simply vitality of life? We like to talk about those things here at the Simple Life radio show, Stories for the Adventurous at Heart. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Cynthia Fernandez, and I hope you enjoy our show today. I'm joined in studio today by someone who has lived and worked in an alternative setting. She has great experience with different types of education. She has graciously agreed to come and share her stories today, and I want to invite you to hear from her in just a moment. But first, I want to mention that when I first met Caitlin, I was taking part in a naturalist program here on the Central Coast, and recently I enjoyed a women's tracking workshop that Caitlin actually teaches, and it was awesome, very empowering. I got to say, a lot of fun. And then, what struck me most about Caitlin when I first met her was her playfulness and her fun-loving nature. And I was also intrigued by her strength and passion for life. And I always feel comfortable and at ease in her presence. So, welcome, Caitlin Williams.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.
It's so great to have you here. I start off every show by asking people a little basic information about themselves. So, tell me where you were born.
Well, I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I don't have any memories of that place because I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we moved there when I was a toddler. So that's where my memories start.
Aha. And what is your favorite book?
My favorite book, well, I have to say that my favorite book is a book called The Adventures of Camilla and the Fairy Cat, written by my mother, Cordelia Williams, and it's a fairy tale that includes her art that she made, hand-painted photography, and it's a rite of passage story that's really documenting my growth from child to young woman.
Wow.
So it's a really special, beautiful gift that was created just for me. So as far as favorite books, I would have to say that's the one, but there are a lot of amazing books out there, and I love all field guides and lots of scientific literature, and some of my Daniel Quinn, who wrote Ishmael and My Ishmael and the Story of Bee, is one of my favorite authors, and I loved Castaneda when I was a teenager, and all of the sort of books about nature education and nature immersion, Starhawk, those sorts of things were the books that I was raised on or grew up on, interested in as a teenager. So that's my favorite genres.
So maybe those books you just described growing up with sort of fashioned you for your current professional career.
Absolutely. I think really it was the people that I grew up around who fashioned me for it, because they're the people who introduced me to those books and fed the curiosity and love of nature.
Right. So, maybe you can tell us a little bit about a person in particular that may have been an inspiration for you.
Well, there were a lot of inspiring people in my childhood. I like to say that I grew up in an intentional community. It was a neighborhood in Charlotte where a lot of artists moved to. So I was surrounded by artists. My mother's an artist, and there were theater people and musicians and naturalists all in this neighborhood. And a lot of these people were single parents, so there was a real sense of community and sharing of children. So we really got that experience of running in packs and going to the household that we wanted to be in the most. And my mother's household was very popular because she's so wonderful and creative, and always had things for us to do, and she loved to make pies, so that really drew in the crowds. But another of my favorite households was the friend of mine's parents who were gardeners and very earth-based teachers. They taught me about the sun and the moon cycles and how to grow a plant, about edible plants. And my mom also really encouraged the understanding of what's edible, what's not, how do you live on the land, because she wanted to honor my lineage. My father, who had died when I was very young, had Native American blood, and my mom saw in me a passion for nature, and she knew that for my father that was something that he was very proud of in himself. So she also really nurtured that.
So, did you have grandparents growing up?
I did not have grandparents. I had great aunts, and they none of them actually lived very close to us. So the closest was in Pennsylvania, my great aunt Dot, and then my great aunt Katie, and they had a lot of influence on my life via my mother. From my mom's own mother had died when she was young, so they raised her, and then they were the people that she turned to for advice about how she should raise me and what she should encourage in me and things that she had to do as a mother. And so they were her support, and sort of vicariously had a big hand in my upbringing. But I have been told on many occasions by my own mother that I have a very similar spirit and aspect to her mother, who I never knew. But
Wow.
she was also she was a biologist, so she was an educator and a biologist, and she obviously mentored my mother into a passion for nature, and that translated to me. And sometimes my mom is really taken aback by how similar I am to this person that I never knew in this lifetime.
And what is your current professional career?
Well, I consider myself a wildlife tracker, and I work mostly as an educator in wildlife tracking. So I have Knowing Wild, where I do the women's tracking courses that you came to, and I also teach some environmental biology classes at a local community college. And then I do work with young children doing nature programs, and I'm also a nanny. But in general, I consider myself a naturalist and tracker and educator.
An educator. And hearing me speak a little bit earlier about this special school that's sort of setting up for, future learning, is there any perspective that you could share in terms of our typical organizational administration that we work with, and compared to maybe nature connection?
Well, as a commentary on our current educational system, for me, I really had a hard time in school because they determined pretty early on in my schooling that I had a learning disability and should be taken out of the classroom and taught privately or separately. And then they later realized that I was also incredibly gifted, and I spent a lot of time in elementary school being told that I was not smart, or that I was smarter than everyone else. And I just really do not think that there are any unintelligent human beings out there. And I think that we would do better as educators to look at each human being as sacred, and to know that there are gifts within them, that they have an intelligence. Intelligence is really the survival mechanism or gift of human beings. A lion is really good at catching deer, and coyotes are really good at running food down, and human beings are really good at using their minds to move through situations, but not all of our minds work alike. And I think we have a school system that's really geared towards one kind of learning, and there's so many ways to learn. For me, being immersed in nature is the most mind-expanding, fulfilling, sort of holistic way to learn. And I think I remember in elementary school them trying to teach me to read and then deciding that I couldn't. But my experience of it was that I was not interested, and I wanted to go outside, and I was basically just irritated that I couldn't go out and play. And so they were asking me to read and do these things and learn these letters, and it was almost like an act of defiance to not even try, because my spirit wanted to be on the land.
Yeah. Wow. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Simple Life, Stories for the Adventurous at Heart, with your host Cynthia Fernandez and our guest Caitlin Williams. We're going to take a break, and when we get back, we're going to hear more about Caitlin's adventures, and maybe she'll talk about trapping a lion. Hi, we're back with the Simple Life Stories for the Adventurous at Heart, and we're enjoying Caitlin Williams, our guest in studio today. We do have a caller, and thank you for holding patiently through the break. But so we're going to take that caller now. Wendy.
Hello. I want to thank you both for giving us options in literature and education. And I wanted to say to Caitlin that the arts aren't on the standardized tests they give in schools, and the test scores grade the schools, and school grades set real estate prices. It's a big deal that they keep the artistic kids out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like parents to know that, and I thank you for giving parents options. I think that's very important.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for the appreciation.
Oh, just wanted to say that to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, so I kind of teased before the break, Caitlin, about your lion experience. I wonder if you'd be willing to tell us about that excursion that you were part of.
I would love to. Mountain lions are pretty much one of my favorite topics. They're by far one of they're just my favorite animal to track. There's not a lot of big cats in the East, and there's certainly controversy over whether they're there or not. So being in California, the opportunity to track mountain lions is abundant, and it brings me great joy and pleasure to have the opportunity to follow these animals and read their stories through their tracks. And I also have the fortune of having a friend who works on the Mountain Lion Project with UC Santa Cruz, and got the opportunity to go out and experience the capture. And that was interesting to see all the processes of how they trap the animals and take care of them, check their health.
So the purpose of the capture was actually to preserve the animal's health and perhaps study some of the behavior?
Well, yeah, the purpose is actually to collar the animals or recollar in this case, and get information off of the collared animals, which helps to understand their biology and can also be used in creating or making choices for them in our policies and how we use land, like creating wildlife corridors and things like that. But one of the things that they do is that when they do capture the lions, they do a general health check. But the really astounding thing for me in that experience is, as a lover of animals in general, and I am a cat owner and have been my whole life, I discovered that there's a really key difference there's a lot of key differences between mountain lions and domestic cats, but the one that really became apparent for me is that while I can spend plenty of time with domestic cats, I am horribly, terribly allergic to mountain lions.
Is that part of your tracking strategy?
Well, now when I'm walking in the woods and I sneeze, I definitely look around, really, I'm like, oh, maybe there's a lion nearby. But since I've never had such an amazing allergic reaction to anything, and my entire face was swollen for a week solid. So
you must have been really close to that lion.
Well, yes, we were all very close. I mean, they catch it and anesthetize, or not anesthetize, but put it to sleep. Tranquilize.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then put it on a tarp, and they do all the measurements and
check their teeth
and all that. All those sorts of things, and you're right there. The lion is right there. You're just there with it.
Now, were you actually tracking the lion to get close enough to tranquilize?
No, this particular lion already had a collar, and it was a recapture situation. So they were familiar with this particular lion and its habits, and they could track it with the GPS. So that's a real distinction. Tracking, as people think of it now, is using telemetry and antennas and following electrical signals. And then there's traditional indigenous tracking of actually reading the spoor that's left by the animal.
We would think of it as footprints in dirt. You know, the animal prints. You might take your dog to the beach, and as you're walking him across Carmel Beach or Del Monte Beach, you see the tracks the dog leaves behind, and maybe when it runs, the spaces get greater between the footprints, and if it stops to wrestle another dog, the tracks look completely different.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Every movement is recorded in a case like on the beach where you have miles of sand. That's some of the most amazing learning that you can experience as through tracking, because you can see this movement of the feet, of the footfalls going and going, and then as the animal changes the way it's moving, the footfalls change. And so there's this observable change in how the tracks are, the pattern that they're making on the ground.
And the meaning that goes with that.
That's the interpretation aspect.
Yeah.
So that has to do with understanding the biology of and the natural history of the creature that you're tracking.
It's fascinating. We're speaking now with Caitlin Williams, a wildlife tracker. The group that she teaches with is called Wildlife Tracking. Women's Tracking Workshop is the one that I actually attended. You can reach her at email by using knowingwild@gmail.com. Or give her a call at 831-854-7735. And so, you know, we were speaking earlier about education, and you were vulnerable enough to share that reading wasn't one of your favorite subjects in school. And to look at you and speak with you, you're obviously well read at this point. Can you help us understand the correlation and the connection that's made with having experiences outdoors, maybe finding patterns, and academic learning?
Well, I believe that learning for the human being is a natural experience, and that to take humans as an organism out of nature and put them in an artificial surrounding is not conducive to the full brain of the human being. We evolved in nature, and our brain is designed to look at and understand the patterns of nature. So reading wasn't that interested in it, but wildlife tracking fascinated. And as an adult, I can look at that, and in a certain way there's some real correlations between reading and tracking. You're basically looking at symbols on a surface that give you meaning. And one represents sounds that then form into words, and then we have this understanding of what that word means. And one represents an animal, and the spacing of those tracks represents a movement. And that movement represents an interaction with the landscape that it's in. And so reading takes you into a sort of that mind world. You know, you're following the trail of these sounds into words, and then the words into meaning. And it's a created world, which is also beautiful, because that's one of our gifts as human beings, is the ability to create and imagine and envision. And then the tracks is following these symbols into a story that then expands into the landscape. And there are a lot of people believe that our ability to read and have these thoughts that that are outside what we're experiencing in the moment was actually a result of developing the ability to track, because as you're tracking the animal and you're seeing these changes and in the pattern of the footfalls, you start to wonder, what's it doing? Where's it going? What's it interacting with? And then make that next leap of, oh, wow, this bobcat has been walking and all of a sudden it's changed its gait and it seems to be slowing down. And then as a human being, we have developed this ability to say, hey, look, up there's a patch of poison oak. Maybe there's rabbits in there hanging out, and the bobcat knows that, and it's changing its gait because it thinks that there might be the ability to hunt, or it's coming into an area that it hunts in. So that projection into the future, or that projection into the imagination, could potentially be the result of tracking developing in the human species. And the other thing that I really love about tracking is that it does get you into the experience of the animal. And as a tracker, for me personally, it's very hard to follow an animal and see it making decisions and changes in its trail without seeing that there is intelligence there, that there are choices being made and thoughts that it is having. So I think tracking also develops a respect for the natural world in a way that basic environmental education doesn't necessarily.
If you're just joining us, our guest today is Caitlin Williams, wildlife tracker, and I'm totally enthralled with your experience and your perspective given that experience. So, being in a classroom, I volunteered in my granddaughter's classroom on a number of occasions. There's a lot of children. They have great support in the classroom in terms of parental volunteers and a teacher's assistant. A lot of high energy children, and everybody wants to go outside. So how do you, I know that you also work with children, how do you balance that natural curiosity that you want to foster, and at the same time you're wanting to facilitate their learning something that is maybe not something they appreciate the value of yet?
Well, children are learners, period. And we can want to create all the structure around them that in the world, but it doesn't necessarily facilitate learning. What facilitates learning is being able to observe the children and match their energy and follow what their curiosity and their passion is, and ask them good questions. So when I'm in a group of rowdy children, it's, to me, the opportunity to be rowdy, and I can lead them through their own energy. So it's mimicking their energy and then channeling it into a certain avenue. Generally I'm teaching about nature. So if the children are being rowdy, I'll say, hey, let's all be this animal, or, let's play a game where we're all squirrels, and then we'll do something in that game that actually mimics a squirrel's biology or a squirrel's natural history. We'll gather acorns or whatever, and then from there, just so many potential learnings can happen just from that simple, let's imitate the animals. With the squirrels, we'll gather acorns. And from there, you could learn to process acorns and how you eat acorns and what's inside of an acorn, what's living in there, what's this larva. You could also move into building shelters and making homes like the animals make. So I think a lot of being a really good educator has a lot more to do with letting go of control than controlling. Well
said. Okay, if you're interested in taking part in one of Caitlin's classes, workshops, women's tracking workshop, for example, you can reach her at knowingwild@gmail.com or 831-854-7735. And we're going to go to a break in a moment, so please stay with us for after the break.
Of a situation would you like? Let's suppose, I do this often in vocational guidance of students. They come to me and say, well, we're getting out of college and we haven't the faintest idea what we want to do. So I always ask the question, what would you like to do if money were no object? How would you really enjoy spending your life? Well, it's so amazing. As a result of our kind of educational system, crowds of students say, well, we'd like to be painters, we'd like to be poets, we'd like to be writers, but as everybody knows, you can't earn any money that way. Or another person says, well, I'd like to live an out-of-doors life and ride horses. I say, do you want to teach in a riding school? Let's go through with it. What do you want to do? When we finally got down to something which the individual says he really wants to do, I will say to him, you do that. And forget the money. Because if you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you will spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living, that is, to go on doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid. Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And after all, if you do really like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, you can eventually turn it, you could eventually become a master of it. It's the only way to become a master of something, to be really with it. And then you'll be able to get a good fee for whatever it is. So don't worry too much. Somebody's interested in everything. And anything you can be interested in, you'll find others will. But it's absolutely stupid to spend your time doing things you don't like in order to go on spending things you don't like and doing things you don't like, and to teach your children to follow in the same track. See, what we're doing is we're bringing up children and educating them to live the same sort of lives we're living, in order that they may justify themselves and find satisfaction in life by bringing up their children, to bring up their children to do the same thing, so it's all wretch and no vomit. It never gets there. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question: what do I desire?
And that was Alan Watts, for anyone who knows Alan. A lot of books at Pilgrim's Way Community Bookstore and Secret Garden. Years gone by from Alan Watts. We don't have too many of his publications, but can always order them for you. Welcome back to Simple Life, Stories for the Adventurous at Heart. You've been hearing from Caitlin Williams, who is obviously a very adventurous young woman and willing to share her adventures with others so they might share with others. If you need to or want to get a hold of Caitlin, her website is Knowing Wild. That's KNOWING wild.com. You can reach her by email or phone 831-854-7735 so that you too can be exploring the wilds inside and out for yourself. So, Caitlin, we left off with a lot of really good information from you about working with children and actually fostering their energy and curiosity. And then Alan Watts, of course, the perspective of really stepping back and looking at what it is that we want for our children and asking the tough questions. You know, do you want them to have the life that you had? Or is there something perhaps that can be added or balanced to make that an even better experience for your grandchildren? And I wonder if you can help us with your perspective on, I don't know, I spent some time with you today and you laugh a lot. And when I spend time with you, I laugh a lot. And I, you know, I really admire your willingness to know what you know about maybe, for example, things that could be better for children in school, and still have the lightness of being to appreciate everyday life.
Well, you know, I think it's a little hard to comment on because part of it's just character. I am a light-hearted person, and I don't want to suggest that people shouldn't at any point be serious, because there's value in that too. But joy is so important in life, and joy comes from your heart and the things that interest you. So that's one of the main things that needs to be in education, is following the interest of the individual. And we all are individuals, and we're all brilliant in our own ways. And I don't think that there's one kind of institutionalized school stamp that's going to really meet the needs of every single individual. So
enjoying life day to day is a big part of the formula.
Well, yes, enjoying life day to day and enjoying your pain and your struggles. And that's not to say you should wallow in misery, but sometimes you will not be able to help it in life. If you're living fully, you're going to encounter things that are painful. And so just knowing that there's something to be gained from it, some learning that is going to arise, some depth of character that you're going to develop, and being able to just know that even in the worst times there's value in it, and that you can find joy in those experiences. Maybe not in the moment, but
you can trust.
Yeah, you can trust.
Yeah.
I had one of my aunts, not my great aunts, but actually my mother's sister. At one point, she was very intuitive, brilliant, sort of in that way of just looking at somebody and knowing what's going on with them. But there was a time when I was very, very unhappy in life, and I visited her during that time, and I didn't say anything about this. I was just, carrying on as if all was normal. And we're sitting there eating, and she just stops and she looks at me, and she was in her 70s at this point, and I was in my 20s, and she says, there's been many times in my life that I wished I had died.
Wow.
But I'm really, really glad that I lived. And I was very taken aback, because I thought I was hiding this pain that I was in. But I was so comforted by that. And, eventually I did get through it. And I am a different person, and I have more compassion because of having painful experiences, and a deeper understanding and tolerance for people who might not be in that joyful state that I tend to be in, of laughing and enjoying myself. But I am here to say that you can come back around to that playful joy. It's always there. It's always available to you. And finding things to make yourself laugh every day is definitely important. Sometimes when I really am feeling down, I'll send out a message to my friends on Facebook or via email and say, hey, has anybody seen anything funny? Like, send me links to things that are funny. And that is so much fun to do, because I have seen some really, really great things by making that request.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, very fun.
Well, we sure have enjoyed having you. I know a lot of listeners out there are probably scratching their heads right now, but if you would like to comment about Caitlin's visit today or anything else regarding the Simple Life show, we do have a Facebook page. It's just Simple Life. You're welcome to join us there and follow our feed. And as I mentioned earlier, tracking with you was just awesome. I mean, it was I've been tracking a lot, but that was the first opportunity I had for tracking just with women. And it was so interesting because women were, just have a different perspective. There's stopping and looking at markings at the bottom of a redwood tree, and we're all trying to figure them out. But the descriptions and the expressions of how they were seen and what they, sort of brought to mind, and could it be this and could it be that, was different. They just seemed more open and expressive and comfortable to be themselves in a group of women.
Well, I mean, probably most of the people listening haven't had the opportunity to track with anyone, whether they were men or women, but there are studies out there that suggest that women are not that necessarily that they learn better in groups of just women, but that they are more likely to express themselves. And we all know that everyone can be very creative, especially women. So yeah, we get some wonderful answers, and the women's tracking group is really the opportunity to facilitate that quieter voice that might not come out as loudly in a group that's more, has more men in it, or more male, because males in general, not necessarily across the board, but they can be a little bit more out front and not loud is not the word I'm looking for, but they're more willing to state their ideas and have a conversation that's a little bit more, argumentative.
Yeah, sometimes they sort of take charge, and that's one of the things we love about them.
Well, yeah,
but it makes a difference.
And I can be very argumentative myself, but women in general like to sort of have the open forum. It could be this, it could be that,
right,
opposed to it is this, it is that.
Well, I had such a good time, and I can't wait to do it again. And one of the things that I want to share with the audience today is a game that we play using imagination and using observation and just being able to put those things together. So as we did last week, we have a little treat from Isabella. And I'm going to play this for you, and I'll be back as soon as it's completed. One of the favorite things we like to do when we're in the car driving, or, taking care of doing hair at home in the morning before school, is a game that we call Spin a Story. And so I thought that maybe we could spin a story now. Bella, would you be willing to spin a story?
Yeah, I'd love to spin a story.
So I'm going to give you 4 pieces, and then you can take those 4 pieces and make up a story, okay?
Okay.
A rose, a butterfly, a little boy, and a tall tree.
A rose, a butterfly, a little boy, and a tall tree.
Yep.
Do you know what kind of tree you would like it to be?
Eucalyptus tree.
One day there was a little boy swimming at the pool. He was doing some stuff, and he did a little flip under the water, and he was doing a handstand. And so he felt something tickle his foot, and he was there with his friend, so he came up, and there was no one there. He still felt the tickle, but it was scrambling. So he lifted up his foot, and there, standing on his foot, was it was a type of butterfly. It was a really pretty one, too. It had all different colors. It was blue and yellow, and it had long feet and nice pretty ears, and it was called a giant swallowtail butterfly. It was also red and black. It was a clever little butterfly, too. It got his attention really quickly. And then they became friends. But this little butterfly was a wild butterfly, so it didn't like to stay in the house a lot. And one day it found a rose, and it was the prettiest rose you could ever see. It was bright red and juicy. He just wanted to see it, but he flew up towards it and he got caught. I wonder what that was, said the little butterfly. Well, let's see. He tried to fly out and he couldn't. He was stuck. Oh my God, he was stuck. That's not good. And the little boy came. He tried to find the butterfly, and the butterfly's name was Nana. And so he called, Nana, where are you? But the butterfly didn't come. And he looked everywhere, high and low, and he saw this man carrying a giant swallowtail butterfly. And it looked exactly like Nana. So he asked, where'd you get the butterfly? And the person said, what butterfly? The butterfly in your little container. Oh, there's a butterfly in there? Oops, I didn't mean to get that. So he opened up thing, and the butterfly flew out and landed right on Paul. And so after that, then the boy was climbing a eucalyptus tree, and he was having so much fun. He loved it. He climbed it and climbed it and climbed it. It was so tall. He kept climbing and climbing. He thought it was a redwood tree because it was so tall. And then the butterfly started to turn a little gray because the butterfly was dying. It took him a while, so next he let it go. And that's the end of our story for today.
Wow, that was a good story, Bella. Does the story have a lesson to it?
Nothing wants to be kept forever. And if you love something, let it go. Let it go.
Boy, isn't that true. Well, thank you, Bella. I look forward to your next story at Storytime. And that's going to take care of our time for today. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, all the sponsors. And we look forward to having you join us next week at 4 o'clock on KRXA 540 AM.
Don't need no nothing, all I need is time for that simple